This is Eric Romoff, and this is the Dynasty Hotseat.
Yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to the Dynasty Hot Seat. It's the only Dynasty show out there that is a certified Inferno. And today, you recognize this guy if you've watched the Dynasty Hot Seat before. It's Eric Romoff. He's back on the hot seat. He just can't get enough, and I know you guys can't get enough either because he always absolutely crushes it when he's on. Now, normally I'll say, this guy's from this thing, doing this thing. But Eric, you might be the busiest guy in fantasy football. Tell the people, where can they find your work? They must know you already, though, probably, right?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm the busiest, but it sure feels like it. I have a problem saying no to things and to people, so I generally have a laundry list of affiliations out there. The best way to find all of my various comings and goings is on my Twitter page at Fantasy Nav. But this year, I am contributing to the Fantasy Alarm, where I'm doing wide receivers and cornerbacks, as well as their Thursday night football stream. I am still the co-host of the In Between Media Fantasy Football podcast every Tuesday night. I've also joined the charting team over at FTN Data, so going all in on some film study, and I'm still a member of drroto.com.
Man, yeah, just catch Eric everywhere you turn. You're going to see Eric absolutely crushing it. So it's great to have him on the hot seat, and great to see you guys as well. Welcome along if you are new here. Hey, Eric, I've seen a pretty devastating stat. I'm going to say 83% of people who have listened to the Dynasty Hot Seat in the last month are unsubscribed. What the hell's going on, Eric?
Man. Click the button. It's the easiest way to do it. Mags is out here, one of the hardest working people in the Dynasty game, and you can do that for free. It supports his work. It helps feed the algorithm, which we are all beholden to. Helps more people find his work. That's probably it, right? Like the people that are watching it, they don't want to like or subscribe because then it's going to get on their league mates' feeds and they're not going to have an edge anymore. That's probably what it is.
True. I'll tell you what, if you guys like and subscribe, I'll put out phony episodes for your league mates. You can send them. I'll give them some terrible takes on purpose. How about that?
Red herring.
And you can post them out to your league mates, and they'll avoid all your players. So you just do that for me. How about that? But today, this is the real deal Holyfield episode, Eric, because we're going to go in to this 2025 rookie class. We're going to go through a Superflex way too early mock draft. We don't know where all the chips have fallen just yet, but we're going to give it a go anyway, aren't we, Eric? So let's start at the top. 1-1. This has been a hotly contested pick. I thought everyone was going to come out here and pick Ashton Jeanty. Not being the case. Some people have gone for Jeanty. Some people have gone for Tet MacMillan. Some people have gone QB at 1-1 because it's Superflex. Eric, I can't wait to hear where you're going.
I am the most basic of bros out there. I will let the format inform my decision. So I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders here. I think that getting a potential game-changing quarterback onto your roster, if you have the 101, it's probably because you're a little light at that position. So I think you go out there and you address it immediately, right? If there's a bunch of buzz for some of the other players we'll talk about later, maybe you move out of it. But if you're making the pick at 101, I don't think that you can turn away with a quarterback like Sanders who can be a foundational piece for your builds.
Yeah, the more I watched Sanders this year, I thought he just got better and better. Like there were some question marks on him last year, I thought, and just the more I watched him this year, I'm like, this guy's so accurate. He's like really like starting to read defenses a lot better. I don't have any fear that the lights are going to be too bright for him because of who he is and who his family is. And I mean, is it weird? The thing I'm worried about the most is that he might be a package deal with his dad, and that's a whole thing. That's like the biggest red flag almost.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's really a red flag, right? Like if you think about it, he's playing under his dad's reign right now, and you would take this level of play at the NFL level if you were rostering him, right? So I think it might make things a little bit complicated when it comes to draft time, right? But ultimately, there's going to be 4 or 5 teams that are very QB needy, and one of them, if it is a package deal, would be happy to welcome Papa Dion into their ranks as well. The thing that you mentioned that really stands out for me is his ability to read and dissect defenses has taken a immaculate leap forward. Like he was he was kind of lost out there in the early days of his career, and he's shown that he's put in that work and that study to understand how defenses are trying to slow him down and how to effectively counterpunch that. And that is maybe one of the most transferable skills to the NFL level, right? Like if you can find where those soft spots are in the defense, even if you're kind of a mid-range player, you can still be a very effective quarterback in the NFL.
Absolutely agree. And God damn it, Eric, I'm going to say, give me him in New York with Malik Neighbors, and he's got to be right up there. Like he can't. That is my ideal landing spot for him. Pair him up with Malik Neighbors. Of all the teams that could take him, I'd love to see him there. No, I'm not sure about the rest of that team, but Malik Neighbors makes me real happy with Shedeur Sanders. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that would be incredible. I don't know if it's going to happen. All of the rumor mill and whispers out there are that New York is probably the most averse to the idea of a package deal, and that Dion doesn't want him going to the Giants. The NFL has a bit of a checkered past in terms of dads influencing where their kids are drafted. So maybe that comes to pass again this year. But just from an on paper standpoint, right? Like if you drop him into a spot where he has got an absolutely dominant weapon that has shown the ability to put up elite production with far below average quarterback play so far in his young career, just imagine getting someone like Sanders into a situation like that where they're going to be trailing a lot and he's got that safety blanket baked in.
Okay, I love that. So Sanders going off the board at 1-1. Who's following up at 1-2?
Man, I so badly want to adhere to my basic bro standard and go with another quarterback here. But I think this is the point where you really have to look at one of the skill position players. And I'm going to go with Ashton Jeanty here. For me, especially in the dynasty context, the amount of difference makers at the running back position is such a short list of players, right? Like they are few and far between, to where if you get one that is going to be, a rock for your roster for the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have an edge over the field, right? And yes, we're doing this in December where we don't know exactly where he's going to fall, but I can say confidently he's going to be drafted early enough to where any team that is acquiring him is going to be very needy at the running back position. So he'll step into a substantial workload from day one as well.
With these running backs, do you think there's a bit of a trend right now where actually experience seems to be really important? We used to always talk about it takes wide receivers 3 years to really get up and running. Is that kind of creeping into the running back game as well here, or is this just kind of coincidence that these old guys are crushing it?
Yeah, I think it's a confluence of different things, right? Experience, I think, generally matters, right? Both we as dynasty managers and NFL talent evaluators get kind of itchy with the trigger finger, right? If someone's not providing immediate return, they're real quick to just kind of turn the page. But you look at guys that coming out of this COVID generation of college players who have a lot of different stops on their resume and a ton of snaps, of experience, and all of a sudden they get to the NFL and they look steady, right? They look stable. They look like someone that in generations past might have been drafted and sat behind a starter for a few years, right? So I do think that there's some credence to the idea of these veteran guys having a bit more appeal as we see them start to produce more on the field. But also, we're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, right? Like at a certain point, their bodies need to develop, their brains need to continue to develop, right? We're getting far more of kind of close to their peak capability at the point of entry when they're a little bit older than these guys that are a little bit younger and a little bit more raw.
Yes, well, some of these older players, their brains still need to develop. Shout out Deebo Samuel. So anyway, let's rock on
Did you see Deebo got community noted? That was maybe the highlight of my year on social media.
Also watching the game last night for you as well. Last night when he dropped that ball, I don't think I've ever cheered a player dropping a ball like I did when Deebo dropped it. It was kind of like, I don't know if this is the thing where you grew up, Eric, but in the UK, whenever you went to school, if you're in like your cafeteria, your lunch hall, and someone like drops the plate on the floor and it smashes, in the UK, everyone like is ironic cheers, like ruptures of cheers. That's how I felt when Debo dropped the ball. Like the whole cafeteria going, "Way, dickhead!" Right? That's
Exactly.
essentially how I felt. Poor old
Yeah,
Debo, though. I'm sure
the
he's
crowd goes wild, right? Like
yeah,
if you're gonna go out there and squawk a little bit and try to do the squeaky wheel thing to get a little bit more looks going your way, and then
yep,
you're not going to capitalize on that, like people are gonna dunk on you, right? It might get you some more passes, but like you gotta execute, you know?
yeah. Gotta execute for sure. I'm sure Ashton Jeanty will be executing for sure. He's going at 1-2. Who's going next? Are you going back to the running back? Well, you going quarterback, wide receiver? There's so much to do at the top of this class. It's really good.
There really is, and I'm sure this will sort out into more clear tiers as we get further into the pre-draft process.
Hmm.
But at least for me, like there are 4 or 5 guys that are kind of all clumped together at the top of this
Yeah.
draft, and your individual team needs is probably going to play one of the heavier roles in deciding which direction you go. I'm gonna lean back on the format here and head back into the quarterback market, and I'm gonna bring in Cam Ward, a player who, for my money, I think is probably the most likely to be throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors next year, but
Mm.
also a guy that has shown an ability to develop at his various stops throughout the college ranks. The ability to complete all the different types of throws is something that I think translates very well to the NFL level. Good in open space, he can improvise pretty well, extend plays, right? Like all of the things that give you cover in terms of the ways that his outcome can play out, right? Like he can end up in an ideal situation. He could end up in a spot where they're really having to lean on him, or where he just needs to pepper his elite target, right? There's so many different influences that landing spot can have, and I think Ward is the type of player that should be able to be functional and produce in really all
Mm.
of them in my mind.
I really wish we got to see him play a real like heavy hitter. We seen that
Mhm.
Miami team turned out to be a little bit of fool's gold, but a lot of that was the defense on the other side wasn't really holding up their end of the bargain. So I think it's a bit of a shame that we never seen Cam Ward go up against like one of these big hitters, like a Georgia or Ohio State or one of these teams that like you'd really see what he's made of. So this is kind of cool in a way about Cam Ward because there's so much we still don't know about him. We've seen him do the Houdini tricks against some lower opposition, but I think for my one, he's definitely worth the gamble, especially like you said in Superflex. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to be a basic bro like you, man, and just go for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got more Bo Nix shares than I intended to have heading into the season, right? But like at a certain
Exactly.
point, it's like it's going to have the job all year. He'll have a bit of runway, right? There are things that kind of supersede some of the more nuanced aspects of player evaluation, right? Flawed guys can still be of value, and kind of like I was saying with the 101, right? Like you're drafting this early, the place on your roster where you're most likely to have a void is at quarterback. So I think you should
Yeah.
use that early draft capital to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cam Ward, this I can't wait to see him play. He's got so much playmaking ability. I think he'll be a fun guy to watch next year for sure. And who's following up at 1-4 right after Cam?
1-4, I think this is the point where if there is a player at their position that has a significant gap between them and the rest of the field, this is still a point where you have to consider that. So for me, tapping
Yeah.
into the wide receiver market, going to go with Tet MacMillan here, uh, a guy that I think his outcomes range somewhere between like Quentin Johnston on the low end and Drake London or so on the high end, right? He's shown an ability to catch the ball for more frequently than
Yeah.
Quentin Johnston has, but in terms of
Yeah.
how his skill set profiles, right? Like the big body contested catch specialist, but also a guy that can still create a fair amount of separation in the short and intermediate part of the field. Good speed for his size overall. A guy that I think he can come in and carry forward this recent tradition of early first round wide receivers having an immediate impact in the fantasy ranks.
I'm sort of blanking, and I'm thinking that maybe I'm getting confused with boxing or MMA. But do they measure like wingspan and reach in at the combine?
They do, yeah. I don't see anything in terms of his wingspan now, but yeah, definitely checks that kind of long armed box, right?
Yeah.
Which helps them in those contested catch situations for sure.
Yeah, definitely. He's just one of those guys where you look at him, you think, oh, he might kind of looks like kind of one of those like Bambi players. You think he might be a bit like lanky and not really coordinated, but he doesn't have that to his game at all, and he's able to separate like some of these other sort of bigger body like Drake London, not the best separator in the world, but wins on like his power and like his ability. Tet MacMillan can do that and like separate. I think you're spot on. There's a tier break for me between Tet and the rest of these wide receivers. I think he's got to be wide receiver 1. So I love that you've got him in there as well. And who's right after him at 1-5?
Yeah, this one gets tricky, right? I think you can make a case for a lot of different guys depending on their draft capital. I think I'm going to stick with wide receivers here and go over to Luther Burden, right? Not exactly the same profile as Tet MacMillan, not by a long shot, but one of these, elite separators, kind of short area quickness type of guys that can really make a defender look silly in a pretty limited amount of field space, right? So his ability as a deep threat is certainly there. He's got pretty solid hands overall. Kind of one of these fast twitch guys in the mode of like a Kadarius Toney, or a more recent example, a little bit of Roman Wilson in his game overall. So things that NFL offenses can find a way to make use of pretty quickly. And depending on draft capital, another guy that could be stepping into a role where he's pretty much the primary target right off the rip. And you have to like that as we kind of enter the middle point of the rookie draft's first round.
Do you think, I think I mentioned on the last show, do you think this could be someone that San Francisco just kind of go, well, we're getting rid of Debo. Let's get in the Debo comp guy. Let's just replace him with Luther Burden. They're in a position, well, they're looking like they're going to be in a position to actually be the team that draft him. What do you do then? Because there's been a lot of talk about, oh, this is a crowded room, but Debo showed when he was on form that he was the guy that you wanted in there out of all of them. Would it worry you if he ended up at a situation like that? Or are you just thinking, you know what, rising boat doesn't rise tides, Eric. What am I talking about? The rising tide raises all ships, right? That's the one.
Yeah. I think it could happen. I mean, as we're seeing with San Francisco down the stretch run of this season, I think they've got a few more holes in their roster overall that they might look to address, at least in the range of the draft where we're expecting Burden to be drafted, right? I wouldn't expect them to try to move up with with a second pick in their first round. But if you were to drop in there, right, like I think that would really signal a changing of the guard in terms of the receiving ranks for the 49ers overall, right? Obviously Ayuk isn't exactly in the best of standings with them either. Then, with how they've constructed their roster, they're a team that needs to save at these skill positions, right? So I think you can make a defendable case for why they would look at him. I just don't know if functionally it's the draft is going to break that way for him.
Yeah, I think he could be right there, but yeah, it's always the deal. I don't fully see it. I get the Debo comp. I don't fully see it, but I see what people mean. Like the same height, same sort of weight. Yeah, guys, it's kind of there, right?
Yeah, I'm closer to your sentiment, honestly, right? Like the size and frame boxes are checked, right? So that's always going to be kind of like an arm's reach comp. And generally speaking, over the last 5 years or so, any receiver who's fantastic after the catch just kind of immediately gets dumped into the Debo category. But at least in the way that we've seen him used and just sort of how he looks in space, I don't think it's the cleanest comp overall. But I mean, if you were to drop into San Francisco, he would certainly be functioning in that role. He would look a lot like him because he would have his job basically.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens with Luther Burden, and let's see what happens with the next pick at 1-6.
All right, so I've gotten into a pattern here, and I think I'm going to keep it going by paying homage to the format. Now we kind of get into a bit of a murkier area in terms of who the next quarterback off the board ought to be. I think this is going to be informed a lot by draft capital, but for me, I think we might actually see Jalen Milroe get some steam as we head into the draft process. And I think he'll be the next player off the board as we do this in a vacuum, right? Like, a little bit of Trey Lance to his game, a little bit of Caleb Williams to his game. The type of player that is going to excite a lot of front offices when he is in shorts and compression wear in the draft process, right? And in turn is going to draw a fairly high draft capital overall. The skill to his game is certainly the deep passes, right? He definitely shines in that regard, but he's shown a bit of touch in his game. That sort of tree of NFL throws that you're looking for. It looks like he's got just about all of them in his locker, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him settle in as like a near top 10 overall pick, and at that point he's firmly going to be on Superflex radars.
What an athlete. Like, it is unbelievable. If you've not watched any Jalen Milroe, like if you put on a Jalen Milroe highlight video, you think he might be the best player to ever play football. Like the way he makes other people look is like he's playing Madden on rookie mode. Like he just like crushes it. But there are those flaws there as well. Like you said, do you think he's definitely going to declare? I'm not sure.
This is part of the difficulty in doing this before the current season is over, right?
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, absolutely not, right? Like he hasn't declared yet, so we can't say that with a certainty. But I think this is one of those situations where players tend to stick their toes in the water or try to get a gauge of how they would be received if they entered the draft process. And if you're a quarterback on a team like Alabama who isn't in the playoffs for the first time in what feels like forever, and you're getting indication that you might be a top 10 overall pick, I think you push your chips to the middle and you go for it, right? So that is the logic that I'm using in drafting him here, right? If he's getting those signals, he will enter the pre-draft process, and if he enters the pre-draft process, to your point, his ability as an athlete is going to impress a lot of people, and he's going to draw a lot of interest from teams with early first round picks. And at that point, like, he's got the job. He needs to be in early to middle first round consideration in Superflex drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a gold mine just waiting to happen. If he hits even slightly like that rushing upside is just huge for your team. So it'd be great getting him at 1-6. And Eric, before we rock into 1-7, we've just passed halfway point, so just a gentle reminder. Let's make sure we're hitting that subscribe. I see you guys. I see the person trying to skip through and the person trying to go to the chapters and try and skip through and to see what the names are. I see you. Hit that subscribe button, goddammit. Right, Eric. Let's see who's
be weird about this out there. You're watching. Right. Just click the button.
Yeah, exactly. Right, Eric. Who's at 1-7 then? For especially shout out to that guy. I'm sure there's at least one of you. Shout out to this guy. This pick's for you at 1-7.
Yeah, the person who hadn't clicked the button at this point absolutely has the 107 in their rookie draft. I feel so confident in that reality. And the good news for them is that they have a pretty interesting option available to them. I'm going to go to Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. I have a bit of a type. I like these big-bodied, size, speed guys, and Harris. I mean, he checks a lot of boxes, right? He has the speed to create separation downfield, but also pretty solid footwork that can help him do just that at the short and intermediate routes. Another guy where we're going to be talking about his wingspan and his catch radius when we get into the pre-draft process, right? And more so than anything else, we've seen a bit of a trend here. Guys that might not be the most heralded of prospects, but are able to create separation downfield and that are able to take contested catches and split them 60-40, 75-25 in their favor. Like NFL teams kind of like those guys and tend to reach for them a little bit, right? Yeah. So I think we're going to be in a position where Trey Harris is, looking at pretty substantial draft capital overall and heading into a spot where they need someone that specifically has his set of skills.
They're not exactly, in fact, they're definitely not. Trey Harris much more bigger bodied than this guy. Do you think that the words Troy Franklin are going to scare some people when it comes to Trey Harris? Because Troy Franklin was that, downfield like gunner who this time last year was in almost everybody's first round. And then we've seen obviously what happened in the draft. Harris better player than Troy Franklin. I think I would say even this time last year, but yeah, he's that kind of mold. Is the NFL moving away from that a little bit? I don't know. It's hard to tell. Like these things come in peaks and troughs as well.
Yeah, they do, and I think some of this, in the case of Troy Franklin, depends on landing spot, right? Like the Denver Broncos don't really use their receivers in that way, and I think if nothing else, there at Ole Miss, I think they've kind of painted him into a bit more of a limited capacity than his skill set would actually support, right? Like
Yeah.
you think about what the Bills were trying to accomplish by bringing in Keon Coleman, for example, right? Like has that ability, but when they actually get him out on the field, shows an ability to be effective in a number of different roles and responsibilities. I think Trey Harris is a little bit closer to that outcome than what we've seen with Troy Franklin. Not to mention that he's got a good 35-40 pounds on him, right? Like I think he's much more Rome Odunze than he is Troy Franklin.
Yeah. Hey, maybe the Bills just reload and take Trey Harris so we can get really excited.
Just hit the redo button.
Yeah, that'll be that. Everyone's going to get real excited then. That would be a good fit. So love Trey Harris at 1.7. Did he lead? No, he didn't. He got injured. I was about to say he didn't lead college football in yards. I think that injury. He was leading at one stage, right?
Heading down that path.
Didn't quite get there, unfortunately, but he still makes it to 1.7 in the draft. Who's going right after Trey Harris at 1.8?
I'm going to tap into the running back market here. I'm going to go over to Nick Singleton out of Penn State. Good size overall. He sort of fits the mold of a player that can have and shoulder a 3-down responsibility, and a guy that is actually pretty solid as a receiver too, right? Good hands overall. Yeah. Probably not quite to like the Breece Hall level, but like I see some Rachaad White to his game, right? A guy that if he finds himself into a position where he's getting the majority of the workload, that athleticism can take a good number of touches and turn it into some pretty significant fantasy output on a week over week basis. Good visibility in terms of his ability to identify those cutback lanes, and that leads to some of those chunk plays. And this is the point, as we kind of round into the second half of the draft, where you're looking for guys that can make an immediate term impact and kind of shift you from either a rebuild into contention or kind of be that last guy to put you over the top. And I think if things break the right way for Singleton, you can find him as one of those players.
He steadily got better and better. He was the guy that came into this year with a ton of hype, right? I think he was like a really highly recruited out of high school. And when I first started doing these drafts, I was like, I don't see it like at all with Nick Singleton. And then just week by week, like he just got better and better. Of course, not to no avail for his team in the end, but that performance against Oregon, really, I was like, okay, that's a good player.
That was the true coming out game. And I think to no avail for his team, for the Nittany Lions, I think that has as much to do with their coach as it does with anyone playing on the field.
Yeah, definitely. But he's that won me over a little bit on Singleton, just seeing like, okay, he's doing that against Oregon as well, who obviously just are playing so well. Like, yeah, that's a good showing for Singleton. So he's in at 1.8. Any more running backs coming off the board at 1.9? You dipping back into wide receivers? Where are you going?
Yeah, not quite at 1.9 for the running backs. I'm gonna go with who will probably be one of the most talked about players in this upcoming rookie draft and in the upcoming NFL draft, and that's Travis Hunter out of Colorado, right? I'll say it outright. The only reason why he is coming off the board at this point in our rookie mock draft is we're not entirely sure if he's going to go into the NFL as a wide receiver yet. If he does, definitively, I think we can see a lot of steam for him landing in like that, 104 type of range pretty readily, right? A guy that, he's got some Patrick Surtain to his game in terms of when he's playing the wide receiver position. His football IQ is obviously off the charts, right? Like he knows exactly what defenders are trying to do to slow down wide receivers. Yeah. And like we were talking about with his teammate at the quarterback position, once you know their plan, your ability to identify the counterpunch is significantly enhanced. And his athleticism is off the charts, right? So the asterisk here with Travis Hunter is much more about whether or not he is going to be a certified wide receiver at the next level, and if he does, probably a player who's going to be moving up boards pretty quickly.
Yeah, I seen an interview with him recently, and they asked, which are you better at, cornerback or wide receiver? And he said both. That was his answer.
Yeah. Which, it's like, to be fair to the young man, that is the correct answer until you get drafted, right? It's just like whichever one the team wants to draft me higher as is the one that I'm better at. And I mean, he's pretty good at both of them, so I don't know if he's being entirely disingenuous either.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I can't wait to see what happens. The most interesting thing for me, Eric, is what do you do? Because I'm still going to take, if they say he's going to play cornerback, I'm still going to take a couple of him just in case.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with the context that we're talking about right now, right? If they say he's going to play cornerback, he's probably still going to be on the board at 109 and probably a bit later, right? And so at that point, like, you make that turn into the second round, and depending on the draft class, like, you're kind of starting to head into speculative range where it's just like, I'll throw them on my taxi squad and see if something develops. And in that sort of cast of players, he's probably got the highest likelihood of reaching that upside. So completely with you in terms of how you approach it, even if he gets that defensive designation heading into his rookie year.
Yeah, excellent. It's going to look so bizarre seeing like the cornerback colors come off the board, like on sleeper right in that draft. It's like, what is going on here? Yeah,
like you're in a fever dream where you're in an IDP draft accidentally.
Yeah, exactly. But he's definitely talented enough to be worth the risk. He's going at 1-9 for now. Anyway, you got 3 picks left of the first round, Eric. Where are you going with the first one at 110?
I'm going to go back to the running backs here. I'm going to look at Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State, a guy that he's got kind of a compact frame to him, which makes him very hard to bring down, right? His ability to break tackles and create yards after contact is something that is very interesting to me. The contact balance that he displays plays a role in that as well, right? He can bounce off of tacklers or just, keep his center of gravity where it needs to be as he is taking on those hits. And, has shown a decent ability as a receiver as well, right? Like, a little bit of kind of Zach Charbonnet and how he's utilized as a receiver and his ability to run routes and, his strength with his hands overall. So again, another player that I think, checks the frame box and the size box that you're looking for, and that brings a versatile skill set to an NFL team that makes him on the short list of guys that can step into a pretty significant role from day one at the NFL level.
I think the most underrated thing about Quinshon Judkins that hasn't really been spoken about, or that's a lie. It has been spoken about ad nauseum, but kind of flippantly. He was able to share a backfield with Trayvon Henderson and not lose any kind of like role at all. Like, Trayvon Henderson's really good back. That'll be a really good back for an NFL team. And Judkins didn't miss a step. They didn't take anything away from him. They trusted him, even when they had a guy like Henderson right there.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes, right? If you look at the landscape of college football over the last handful of years, especially when players have the mobility to kind of go wherever they want, there's no shortage of very talented players that, end up with an all-world talent in front of them on the depth chart and just disappear, just turn into dust, right? So the fact that he is able to, to hold serve and hold his ground and still put up some pretty impressive film overall just speaks volumes to his ability to kind of break through as he goes to that NFL level, where basically every player on the roster is that 99.9th percentile talent, and you have to find a way to showcase your abilities in camp.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing plenty of Judkins. He's a really, really talented player, as I'm sure the next guy is at 111.
I think overall he's a very talented player, but his play this year has some people kind of cooling on him. I'm gonna go back to my deferral to the format and head back to the quarterback land. I'm gonna go with Carson Beck here. His his body of work is one that I think will warrant consideration for first round draft capital, right? Kind of in like that middle, middle to back part of the first round. And I mean, look, in today's NFL, if a team is investing a first round pick in a quarterback, they're generally intending on playing him. I like most about him is his throwing motion. It's quick, it's compact. He gets the ball out quickly, which is a must at the next level. He's got good touch. He's got good accuracy. Obviously, his focus is what I'll call it has been lacking at times, right? He's made some kind of boneheaded decisions, but those are things that I think good coaching can help pull out of him. Not exactly the highest upside player by any means, right? Like, kind of like a Davis Mills type of player, a dude that can get a few years of starts and move the ball down the field and contribute the requisite amount of fantasy points to your Superflex roster, but not someone that I think we're going to be talking about as, a difference maker at the position anytime soon.
And are you just coming back to your theory here on like last year, Bo Nix and these guys? You're like, if they go in the first round, I'm taking them, like, because they're going to get a shot.
Yeah, and that's hard to come by, right? Like, look over your waiver wire right now in mid-December and tell me how many guys are out there that are going to have the job for a while, right? It's almost no one. And so there is value to that, and enough value to where I think it warrants a late first round draft pick overall.
Can I give a smaller shout out? This is like, I don't know if it's just on my sleeper, but I'm giving a shout out to Blake Sims, who I don't think has ever played a snap in the NFL, but is always at the top of the waiver wire for quarterbacks. I don't know if it's just in alphabetical order, but he's constantly sitting there at the top. Shout out Blake Sims, wherever you are. I think that's how he's got most of his notoriety, because he never played a snap.
Honestly, I'm convinced at this point that Sleeper is just like putting little Easter eggs into their app for us to find and muse about, right? Like, Blake Sims is an elite example. Also, you'll periodically see guys that have like negative projections, even though they're starting in the game coming up, right? Like, I think these are just things that like they're trying to catch our attention because they know that we'll double click and spend more time in their app, right?
I love that. I'd be doing the same if I were Chris Sleeper. I'm throwing in Easter eggs everywhere, trying to see if people can find them. And also, like, the little thing, sometimes they change the profile pictures. I'm picking the most innocuous players just so people are scrolling and looking for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how you got to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And we got one more pick, Eric. 112. Who's rounding out the first round for you?
Oh man. So like once you get to about the 9th or 10th pick, you always end up in this sort of glut of guys that can go at the edge of the first or, well into the second round. For me, this is where I find myself considering one of the better tight ends off the board. And specifically for this year, that's Tyler Warren, right? Depending on need, he could slip into like the 205, 208 range. But, in terms of a prospect, a guy that I think has a lot of the transferable skills that modern NFL offenses are looking for, right? They can plug right in. He's not a liability as a blocker by any means, which is kind of the first hurdle to clear, right? And after that, he gets out into space. He's got good hands. He's a pretty solid route runner. Kind of in the mold of like a Tucker Kraft, right? Someone that, isn't going to jump off the page with their athleticism, but someone that does all the needful and is kind of like, replacement level or plus in most of the categories. And, NFL offenses have a value in that, right? Runs well after the catch. He's kind of getting those, those hard to track yards where he's falling forward and, getting another, 2.5 yards on each play. And, that feels like a guy that you might be going to in high leverage situations in the red zone on third down. So, a bit more speculative as we round out the first round, but a guy that I think can fall into a circumstance that would make him very valuable very quickly next year.
What do you think has happened then in the last few, I suppose this months now I've been doing these? Because when I started off, Colson Loveland was the tight end one with a bullet. And everyone was like, it has to be Loveland, it has to be Loveland. And now Warren, he's crept all the way up. It's because they started giving him like jet sweeps and all this crazy stuff recently, so he's really like popping off the page? Or is it just that, you know, Michigan have been a bit sluggish with getting the ball out? Or maybe a combo of both.
Yeah, probably a combo of both, right? You can make a very defendable case for Colston Loveland. If nothing else, I think someone in every league out there is going to fall in love with him and is probably going
Yeah.
to take him off the board prior to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while the upside is certainly there, I mean, there are some concerns about his game overall, right? Like, when I talk about kind of doing the needful as a tight end, a lot of that is just not getting your lunch eaten on blocks. And
Yeah.
Colston Loveland's kind of got some bad tape out there, right? And so it just it's not enough to where I would call it a concern, but it's enough to where like it could slow his ramp up to playing time, and
Yeah.
that's catastrophic at this position, right?
Yeah.
So it's more about what you were saying in terms of those jet sweeps, right? Like, with Phillips being able to demonstrate some of that athleticism, being able to demonstrate some of that run after the catch or run after contact ability, these are things that are exciting. And for a lot of tight ends coming out of college are open questions, right? The college offense doesn't use their tight end in that way as frequently as we see in the
Yeah.
NFL. So when you get a chance to see it on tape and see it repeated on tape, I tend to put a little bit more of a premium on it, just personally.
Yeah, I can see why he's a lot of fun to watch, and this was a lot of fun as well, Eric. We've gone through our first round. I'm not going to let you go just yet because everyone loves extra picks. Give me some of your guys who are like your second round guys or your sleeper guys, and I can tell you what, it's definitely happening because it's happened the last few videos. Someone, at least one, maybe two, maybe even three people, Eric, are going to be screaming, "Where's Omarion Hampton?" Because he's not gone in the first round in a couple of videos in a row now. People are mad. So let's address it. Why is Omarion Hampton not in your first round or the last couple of guests' first round either? What's happening to his stock?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, right? I think when I set up my last couple of picks, saying that there's this sort of glut of players that all lump in between,
Yeah,
pick 9 and pick 20 or so. He's in there, right?
yeah.
I think it's, I think some of it has to do with his play down the stretch. I think some of it, might have to do with, his the way that he. Um, the way that he kind of runs down the field. It seems like he's either seeking out contact or doesn't do a great job of shedding it.
Mhm.
He's put some drops on tape, which is always, a bit concerning, so it, I mean, it's hard to truly diagnose everything that goes into the marketplace of a player's
Mhm.
evaluation, right? Like I would say for me, he's a bit more of a high floor kind of guy. And that's typically
Mhm.
someone that I just look to in the second rounds, right? Like I
Fair.
want to speculate with someone that, is a lottery ticket, or I want to speculate with someone that's like, Romeo Dobbs that you can just plug into your lineup and get, a decent smattering of points every single week. But the more that I've seen of Hampton, the less that I feel like he has that top tier upside, and that's what I'm looking for in the first round.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for it. I'm sure the people in the comments are going to still be mad about it. People love
Be
Omarion.
mad.
I don't know. I don't know why, but yeah, people. Well, I do know why. He's all right. He's a pretty good player. But yeah, people mad about Hampton the last few episodes. Thought I had to address it. But Eric, apart from Hampton, who else you got on your mind here in this pool of players, and maybe give us one guy who you've got way out there as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna take you up on that offer to go a bit further out there. A player that around this time last year I was saying to keep an eye on in case he decided to head into the draft waters. Fortunately, he did not. But Xavier Restrepo for the U, a player that I think brings a very versatile skill set that
Yep.
NFL offenses can use in a variety of different ways, right? Like, obviously some of the players that you can comp him to have kind of bounced around a little bit. There's some Elijah Moore there. He reminds me a little
Yeah.
bit of like Jermaine Burton, right? But good hands, good ball tracking skill. It seems like anytime that his quarterback puts him in difficult positions downfield, seems to come up with the ball, fall more often than you would expect. Good yak guy, just like he checks so many boxes, and this I'll kind of bridge to my tight end point from a moment ago. He does so many things well that I can see him getting playing time more readily and more consistently. And that's really all you're looking for, right? Like we talked about it at the beginning of the show. These guys at the NFL level are to the nth degree the most elite players at their position in the entire world. So if you can lay out a path to where a guy is going to be on the field more often and be able to show that, then you're laying out a path to returning value. And with Restrepo in particular, a guy that I think you can get pretty deep into drafts and be pretty happy about it come, October or November of next year.
I'm so glad you said him. He's one of my guys in this draft. Absolutely. Like going through my process of watching the games this year and giving sort of individual scores to players. Eventually, at the end of the season, obviously, they all total up. Xavier Restrepo ended up being my third highest ranked wide receiver just based on this before I dive deep into like a lot more tape. He's up there. He's top 3, which is up. Well, it's not fully refined. The wide receiver one ended up being Nick Nash because he had such little like competition. But dude killed it. So I need to obviously refine it and go further. But Xavier Restrepo sitting at 3, and he was playing some much better competition than good old Nick Nash. But yeah, Restrepo is one of my favorites for sure. Eric, you got maybe one more for us before we wrap up. You got one more guy that you want to chat about?
Oh man. I mean, I'll instead kind of go rapid fire through a few guys that I think are probably going to get a bit more steam. I like what I've seen from Jalen Royals from Utah State. He's put some really good tape out there. Isaiah Bond out of Texas.
Yep.
I think the thing that's really working against him is there isn't exactly a long list of Texas wide receivers that have transitioned well to the next level. Whether or not that's fair to him, right? Like that bias is baked in, and it's going to influence his value in the marketplace of dynasty drafts, right? Savion Williams out of TCU, another guy that I think can potentially do pretty well for himself in the pre-draft process and might be creeping into like the back end of the first round conversation before long. So, at this point, I think it's really just about like going out there and kind of like you mentioned, going through your process and identifying the guys that catch your attention for one reason or another, and then write that down. Don't forget that, right? Because like their stocks are going to ebb and flow over the course of this pre-draft process. Their landing spot is gonna carry a huge weight in how the marketplace feels about them. But if you have these little nuggets jotted down, these are the guys that you can go out like Bucky Irving and get in the third round of your rookie draft and all of a sudden pay dividends pretty quickly for you.
Absolutely love it, Eric. Thank you so much for running through your first round and a couple of second round guys and beyond. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on the hot seat once again. Eric, before you head off, can you just roll out that big scroll of paper again and tell us all the stuff that you're doing online?
Oh man, I don't know if we have time for all that. All of it rolls up into my Twitter page, which is at FantasyNav. But I am a happy member of the Fantasy Alarm family, doing a variety of things over there, working on some film study for FTN and pushing out content for both drroto.com and In Between Media.
Love that. Make sure you go check it out. Subscribe to all those places as well. So from Eric and from me, guys, thank you so much once again for tuning into the Dynasty Hotseat. And remember, if anything Dynasty, you need to know. Keep it locked on the Certified Inferno. We'll see you next time.